Over the past 20 to 30 years, we find ourselves the most connected that we possibly have been throughout history. We're actually the loneliest we've ever been. These tools that we're spending so much time on, they want to, in a better sense, own you, control you, influence the way you're thinking. And because we become so reliant on them, we're becoming less and less reliant on the typical gathering spaces that brought so much meaning to so many people's life. Throughout the world, we see this, that people are no longer associating with communities. We're also doing this in our families, where people are so disconnected, they're not even sharing a family meal anymore. And so what happens here is...
John, thanks for joining me.
And Scott, such an honor to be here on the High Performance Life podcast. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Thank you so much. Well, it's an honor to be able to learn from someone who's doing something at the highest level, and something that we're attaining to do is continue to grow our podcast audience and build something bigger than ourselves. So, John, your book, your mission, everything that you're doing is really designed to help people find their place in the world and build on it. I love the topic of mattering. I want to kind of start right there. Why is it important for us to matter? Why is it important for us to have some level of significance? And how are you helping people to find it?
Well, I am so glad we went there. And I think a really good way to understand this is throughout history, when you look at commodities such as water, food, air, we've done everything in our power to create systems that make them cleaner, make them available, give us access to them. So we're no longer hunter-gatherers, but they're present in our grocery stores. So entire systems have been set up to help with those things. When I think of the need to matter, the need to feel significant, I put it in the exact same grouping with these other things that are essential for life, essential for us to thrive. But I think what's happened is as we have gotten more intelligent, had better technology, we've made those other things better by creating systems that enhance their worth in our lives. Now, you could argue that our air quality today, because of the pollution and other things, is not as good as it was once, but we're intentionally trying to change it. But what has happened over time is, for millennia, we grew up surrounded by villages. Those villages were in the towns that we grew up in. They were in the workplaces where people spent decades of their career around people who became like family members to them, close associates. We lived in family units where the family was the most important thing in our lives. But over the past 20 to 30 years, we have now switched from this small village to the global village. And when that has happened, it has created this enormous gap. And what happens is mattering is simply more than being acknowledged or noticed. It's this profound sense that your life and your existence have purpose, that your actions hold weight, and that one's presence makes a meaningful difference in the world. And for me, it's the foundation of human significance. It's the invisible thread that ties us to others and gives our lives depth, resonance, and direction. And when it's missing, like water, air, etc., it creates a huge void in our lives. In fact, we can't function without it. And I think it's what is leading so many people to have the mental health issues, to experience loneliness, to experience hopelessness, and so many things that we're seeing in billions of people worldwide. So that's why it matters so much.
I think it's interesting because when you look at connection, which is so important to us as humans, we in some ways are more connected than ever. You know, I can see my buddies from all over the country, even all over the world. I watch their children grow up. I feel like I know things. I've actually met people in public that I've never met, and I feel like I've already known them, right? Because You might have been introduced by a mutual friend, but you've never met in person. In some ways, there's this feeling that you're more connected, but in actuality, you're less connected. You're feeling it's almost like a false feeling of security. And I think that there's social media, even in relationships with your spouses, it becomes so challenging to find that connection when maybe there's this false sense of security out there in the world.
I was recently interviewing Esther Dyson, and for people who don't know or have a clue, never heard of Esther Dyson, she is probably one of the most successful angel investors in history. She invested in Facebook and LinkedIn, in Square, in Evernote. I mean, the list goes up, 23andMe, the list goes on and on and on and on. And yet, in our discussion, we were talking about this epidemic of disconnection and how, even though we find ourselves the most connected that we possibly have been throughout history, as you've described, we're actually the loneliest we've ever been. And part of that is that these tools that we're spending so much time on are all about individuality. They want to treat you as an individual. They don't want to treat you as a group. They want to, in a better sense, own you, control you, influence the way you're thinking. And because we become so reliant on them, we're becoming less and less reliant on the typical gathering spaces that brought so much meaning to so many people's life. We see this in how many people are leaving churches, synagogues, mosques, not just in the US, but in Africa, in Asia, throughout the world. We see this, that people are no longer associating with communities, whether it was the Mormons, whether it was the Elks, things that people used to belong to bring them community. We're also doing this in our families, where people are so disconnected, they're not even sharing a family meal anymore. And so what happens here is, to me, mattering is deeply tied to feeling valued, which is deeply tied to our intrinsic worth as individuals. It's that assurance that we belong, that we're part of something larger than ourselves. And when you don't feel that you have that intrinsic worth, it has this ripple effect that then you don't feel like you're contributing value to others. And I have this belief that if you don't have self mattering, it's very difficult to feel that you matter to others. And when you don't feel like you matter to others, it ruins more and more of that self mattering, which then makes it almost impossible for you to feel and help others feel like they matter. So it has this ripple effect of self mattering and mattering to others, and then influencing how we make others feel like they matter. So it just becomes this ongoing um, effect that is having such and such profound impact on our mental health.
Yeah, I think the mental health situation is challenging because I think the kids have grown up with even more of a false sense of connectivity. I have two sons, and when they announced that TikTok was going away, one of my sons deleted it, and the other did not. And then they brought it back, and the son that deleted it can no longer use it, and it is like an absolute challenge in his life. And now he's extremely driven and disciplined in lots of things, and social media is not his only connectivity point. But I definitely felt like he lost one of his security blankets or something that he was using on a regular basis to disconnect. And there is this challenge, and it can lead to a lack of total connection. And I think back in my career, when you talk about purpose, and it's funny, I was in the financial services industry. I still am today, but I built a fairly successful business 7, 8 years in, just after the 08, 09 crisis. And I started a wine festival in my community, 8,000 people. We donated
Wow.
$175,000 year one to local charities. My aunt was in the process of getting breast cancer treatment at the cancer center at the local hospital. We wrote $100,000 check to that cancer center. I remember feeling something I had never felt in my career. the purpose that I felt in that adjustment in my life, that switch to creating a significance beyond the day job, that impact literally changed my life. And I started putting more effort. I almost decided I was going to get out of doing my career because it felt so empty at the time. But some of that was, it was '08 and '09, and it wasn't the easiest time to help people through the challenges of their financial well-being. But the truth is, by focusing on the community, by building something bigger than myself, by actually connecting with people. I told an advisor yesterday that was a new guy who was talking to me, just joined the industry, and he reached out to me to talk. And um, I said, listen, what I want to tell you is I'm going to give you the recipe for success that I didn't realize until too late. So skip it. Start your impact now. Start your community impact today. Start connecting with people and serving them. Start looking at ways to give of yourself, not take of the world what it will give you. And the change will be drastic. And I said, since that event, year one, my entire family and extended family and my wife's family comes down almost every year and has a huge party in our chalet. I have 8 other businesses that we've become great friends with, that we all share this space. I know the band that comes every year. I have bartenders that work our party and call every year. Like, we've built a community. The charities, the impacts I've been able to make with the charities have changed my family's lives, not just mine, but the people that I've been given to help, because I wouldn't have known them if I didn't connect to these community charities, is so powerful. And it started with something you talk a lot about, and that is just being in the right circle of people. I was in a Rotary Club, something that most people don't join anymore. And I mentioned it to one of my uncles that the spaghetti dinner we were doing was awful. And he goes, what are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I think we should do a wine festival. And he, by the time I got home, had sent me 5 articles of other Rotary clubs across the country that had done it. Fast forward a year later, we're running one of the largest wine festivals in the state of Virginia. And we've gone on to donate $2.5+ million to local charities. And I only say that because it was how many times are you in a room where you say an idea and it just goes into smoke or the clouds because you're not surrounded by the kinds of people that will change your life. And I was blessed enough to be in the right rooms.
I think that's a beautiful story. I have a story I've never told before, which um, kind of takes this in a different direction, but it had to do with a festival. I'm Christian, grew up Catholic, and I saw that one of the most attended concerts are any of the Christian artists who are out there: Chris Tomlin, Third Day. I mean, you name it. And so I was friends with the mayor of St. Petersburg, the last mayor, and his name is Rick Kreisman. Rick happens to be Jewish, super great guy. And I went to him with this idea. So in St. Petersburg, we have the second most areas of park surrounding the water than any city besides Chicago. And I said, and we have these festivals here. We have Reggae Rise Up. We have a big jazz festival, blues festival, etc. And I said to him, Rick, I've got this like really amazing idea. This church I'm going to, called Bridgepoint at the time, the pastor is saying that he wants to reach 100,000 people to get this message to them. And the way he was going about it is like a lot of churches do. He's trying to build this spider web of satellite churches where you can get there, but it takes a lot of income to get there, and it takes a lot of time. And I said, I have this idea that what if we set up the whole waterfront with different Christian bands who were coming in, but we do it like a huge festival, a celebration where not only do we take this church leader, but we take all the leaders of multi-denominational churches, including synagogues from across the community, invite others in across the whole area, and we'll do a whole conference on different themes through this lens. I think it would be amazing. And he agreed. So the linchpin of this whole thing was I needed to get someone to lead this. So I go back to this pastor who's got this mission, who's always talking about the ones and zeros and their importance. And I said to him, Tim, I have got this fabulous idea. The mayor's behind this. I've already talked to a concert promoter who's telling me we could get the Mercy Me. There were like a couple other ones to be headliners for this. I actually think even in the first year, we could get probably 30 to 50,000 people come out to this thing. And he looks at me and he says, well, what would be my role in this? I go, well, I'm setting this up so that you would be the leader of it. We're going to bring these other ministers in, etc., pastors in. And he goes, I don't want that. He goes, I want to be able to control the whole thing. I don't want these other people giving their message. And I just sat there. And to me, it was this opposite that I talk about with mattering. It was this individualistic look at it, that look at what I can build, look at how I can do something, look at what I control, instead of creating this incredible event where within a couple of years he'd probably be touching 3 times as many people with his message and influencing so many people who need influencing to live their lives in a better way. I've never talked about it, but it was one of the most flattening moments of my life when I had done all this legwork and then saw kind of the real person emerge underneath. And I think that's why a lot of people at times have maybe pulled away from churches, because they go into these institutions where it becomes more about the leadership than, to me, it should be about the whole. To me, church has never been about the church. It's about the flock, and it's
Right.
and helping people feel like they matter in life and that they're connected, and it's all that. So sorry for going down that
I don't be
path.
sorry. I love it. First of all, I love St. Petersburg. I just stayed at the Vinoy last week or 2 weeks ago, and I would go 1,000 times. I love that area. Now the weather has been a little cold lately. That was a little disappointing. And I know that I walked the bay there, and I walked 3 or 4 miles in the morning, even in the cold. It was beautiful, and I could visualize, as you were talking about, exactly what it would look like. And it's definitely a great idea. I think in running a major event, one of the things that I've learned is how many people tell me they want to help me. And then when it comes down to it, they want to help me, but nobody wants to help me when it actually, not nobody, that's not true. I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people want to do the work on the day of the event.
Uh,
So it took me a decade or more to hire someone to be the director, where I could turn it over and I could spend some time with my family and not just be running the event or putting out every fire. And we really built this model now where this past year, my son got a opportunity to play in a professional game at DC United's academy. And he got 23 minutes in the game, and it was an amazing thing. And we get a notice on Friday before the Saturday wine festival. It's rained. Okay. When I tell you it's rained at my event, we have had it rain or shine. I've had 5,000 people in a hurricane
wow.
coming up the coast. And we're getting 75 degrees and sunny. Best wine festival we might have ever had. Perfect weather. I get notification my son in DC is going to be, my 15-year-old is going to be getting an opportunity to play in a professional level game with the pro coaching staff, with the team. And I was so pleased that we had put the resources and the right people in place. You talk about the difference between the servant leader and the gardener. I think like the gardening mentality. I'm saying it the wrong way, but I'll let you clarify everybody my thought process. But I was never more pleased. I started the event. I got up at 5 a.m, started the event. It kicked off at 11. At noon, I drove to the airport. I took a flight. I was at the fields watching my son run onto the field with my wife and all of our extended family. And the festival went on without me. And it was a beautiful experience, but it was something that requires people to step up and actually make it about the event, the community, the flock, as you said, completely mandatory. And I've never been more grateful.
Man, I love that. It's such an amazing thing that you're building, and it is also so difficult to build something like that. So, congratulations to you on building that, because I know from just trying to do what I was looking at how much planning goes into it. And you're absolutely right. Putting the right people into place, especially for the day of the event, is what makes it or breaks it. You want to make people feel welcome when they come into that thing. You need people who are on top of the details, because something is always going to go wrong. And it's just amazing the impact that you're making.
Talk to the listeners about the difference between us, why you went away from being a servant leader and towards a different type of leadership. And I love this concept, and I really wanted to have the listeners hear this because it's unique, and I think it's a part of your book, and I really enjoyed it.
So, thank you for asking me about Gardner leadership. In the book, I talk about it through two incredible examples, General Stan McChrystal and my friend Keith. But I want to give it to you in a little bit different way. We recently had the anniversary of the 16th year that's passed since the miracle on the Hudson took place. And I've seen a lot of things about this, and how was Sully able to perform the way he did in that time and space, that he was able to save 155 lives. And as I've looked at it, yes, do I think it was because of his technical prowess? Yes. Yes, do I think it was because of how much time he spent training and the fact that he was a trainer? Yes. But I don't think people take into effect the culture of mattering that Sully cultivated. And I want to talk about this because following the incident, he reflected on what he thought amounted to this flawless landing. And he said, for 42 years, I've been making small, regular deposits in the bank of experience, education, and training. And on January 15th, the balance was sufficient that I could make a large withdrawal. And I think he misses this very important part, that the other deposit that he was making was how he was making other people feel valued and seen by his actions. And I think it was that mental deposit that really saved the day. It's what allowed him to, right off the bat, be able to have the confidence to hand over to his co-pilot the task of going through all the emergency procedures that he needed to, so he could focus on the problem at hand. It was the way that he had treated the crew on board, the flight attendants, to know that they felt like they mattered enough that they could step up in that moment. So, to me, what this culture of mattering really comes down to is creating this environment where others feel valued, trusted, and empowered to excel. And so, this is where this whole essence of a Gardner leadership really takes root. And the way I describe this is, Gardner leadership is really about eyes on, hands off leadership. And when you use this analogy of a gardener, why I love it so much is because leaders who embody this style focus on cultivating, just like a gardener does, the conditions for growth. They plant the seeds of trust, they water the roots of recognition, and they ensure that the lights of purpose shine on in every individual. But building this culture isn't enough. Like Sully did, we have to continuously invest in it, and we have to make those small intentional deposits that he talks about that strengthen the bonds of our teams and communities over time. So to me, we can go more into Gardner leadership, but to me, that's why I think in today's world where we are more disconnected, we have more teams working remotely, servant leadership is what I learned at the Naval Academy. It's what I practiced throughout most of my career, but I don't think it's the best type of leadership that we need in today's world where so many employees feel disconnected and they need to be nurtured just like a gardener does.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is you can build a culture of a company, but you actually need to build the culture of trust. And the culture of trust comes from the relationship you build with every individual human. And, what that shows is Sully had the relationships with everybody for them just to assume what they needed to do in those moments, down to the passengers, the calm in his voice, the ability to lead. I mean, it's an amazing story. And I think it's a great testament to that cultivation of culture, not just kind of building it, setting it, and making it transaction driven. I've always been that relationship focused individual where I'm asking the extra questions. And sometimes you're asking questions that people in a work environment
Yeah.
may feel uncomfortable answering, but I don't care if it's going to help me serve them in a better way or help the entire entity serve others. It's worth understanding who we're dealing with and how we're dealing with it. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and if I can just say one other thing, here's something that your listeners can use. For the leaders who are out there, I want you to just ask three questions about how you're showing up to your team. Are you creating an environment where trust flourishes? Are you recognizing on a regular basis the contributions of those around you in ways that they matter? Matter not just to the strategy of the company, but how are they showing up in a way that matters to the overall team? And then lastly, are you reinforcing purpose on a weekly basis so that people know why they're showing up for work and aligning them to why their role matters in the company and inspiring them to do better? If you're not doing those things, now is the perfect time to start.
That's beautiful. And I have so many stories. I'm not going to share them right now, but there's so many stories that I've seen firsthand where what you're saying is so successful. Is people have to feel that trust. They have to be reinforced with wins and success. And I think that it's just it then builds a culture of purpose together. And I definitely love that. And I go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. If there are three things that people could do today, and I 100% tell you it will make a difference. If it doesn't make a difference, you can contact me and tell me how or why it didn't work. You should start going around your work week thinking on a constantly basis who needs to know that you trust them, because people inherently question their self-worth. When a leader shows their employees that they trust them on a regular basis, it changes the equation. You should walk around thinking who deserves recognition, and don't just say nice job. Be very specific about what they are doing and why it matters. And then the last thing is, remember, as I said with that question, to remind your team of their larger purpose. I remember when I was at Lowe's, I took over this function, and long story short, I inherited. I find out that out of 380,000 employees, they're the most disengaged group in the entire company. And the number one thing I found is that none of them in the call center, in the security command center, in the operations room, they didn't understand how their job mattered to the success of the company or why it mattered to a customer experience. And if you don't close what I call that line of sight, people don't understand why they're coming into work on a given day. So the more you can do these three things: who needs to know you trust them, who deserves recognition, remind them of their purpose, that will move so many mountains for you in your work environment, and in your family environment too. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it works perfectly in our families because so many times, children, especially as they're growing up, want to know that you trust and believe in them. And belief in them is one of the most important things. But then the trust for them to actually execute is really valuable. And our youngest son at 14 moved away to go to an academy and play soccer full time and essentially go to school away. And I remember telling my wife, I said, you know, he's equipped to do this. He wants to do this. This isn't us wanting it for him. We are providing him the outlet. But the fact that he can do this should be a great testament to the confidence he feels in himself and something that we've been able to help him with. And we need to continue to do that. And so when he fails, we continue to give him ideas, but he's got to be the one to pick himself up. He's got to be the one to figure it out. And wow, watching a child grow up at rapid pace because they're not at home is unbelievable. Sometimes a little disheartening and sad because you feel like you're missing things, but it's also, to your point, very special.
Yeah, and let me just give, if it's okay, a couple figures for why this is so important. So let's look at Mattering's impact on retention. LinkedIn did this survey in 2022, and they said they found that 94% of employees would have stayed longer at a company if they invested more in a person's development in and outside of work. Salesforce did a study in 2021 that found that employees are 4.6 times more likely to feel empowered to perform their best when they feel their voices is heard, which really gets into when you're in a meeting and you just dismiss someone. Think about what you're doing to them. And then another really good one is McKinsey did a study in 2021 that burnout accounts for 50% of annual workforce turnover. So employees who feel that their work matters experience less burnout, which is why that is so important.
Yeah. It's what's interesting to me is the value of the personal relationships and understanding their stories, their family, their backgrounds, and why they matter. You know, most people don't work because their impact in their life is their job. Most people work for more time with their family, for opportunities to go on vacation, for living their life and building something outside of work. And when we understand that, it's amazing how impactful that can be. And when everyone that works together understands it, it's amazing how, you know, we have 20, 30 people in our back office group that works together very closely, and they all know about each other. They know every week they're connected to understand what they got into for the weekend. Every week we share
Yeah.
wins and losses. And guess what? 90% of the time they're family focused, they're personal focused. And that builds that connectivity. It's really interesting. And it's been a great experiment. John, with Passion Struck, I was really interested in who you wrote the book for, because I've heard you say that it started out with one direction and the editors kind of had you shift. And the reality is, I think you have four groups of people that really are aligned with this message. And I thought it was perfect. The word that came to mind for me is transition. When you're in a transitional moment or transformational moment, it seems to be the perfect read. But I'd like you to share with the listeners the four groups and kind of the background behind Passion Struck.
Yeah, I'm going to just pick up on what you just said, and then I will answer that question. One of the things that I highlight early on in the book is the need for reinvention. And if you're someone who's still tuning into this, this is something that is so profound for you to listen to. I ended up studying about 750 different people when I was trying to determine the principles that I wanted to put in Passion Struck. And something that I found across all of them was that one, if not the most important key to their success, was constant reinvention. And then once I had found that, I ran across this research from Dan Schwabel, who's a New York Times bestselling author, works at a think tank. He did independent research of 1,200 people and saw the same exact thing, that reinvention is what an Oprah Winfrey does. It's what Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, does. It's what Donald Trump has done countless times throughout his career. So when I think about reinvention and how many times I've had to do it in my career, given what's facing us with the digital revolution, it's only going to happen more often. So when I thought about Passion Struck and who I wanted to impact, I often get this thing from people who are older in their 70s or 80s. Well, Passion Struck isn't for me. I can't use this anymore. Passion Struck really is all about how do you lead a life of significance. And so the different groups that I think it fits really well for are, first, young adults, even high school students who haven't even started this journey. I always think about the mentors that I would pick in my career, and I always tried to pick a mentor who was 2 or 3 steps in front of where I wanted to go, because they have gone through all the potholes that you want to avoid. So I initially wrote this for my 2 kids who are 20 and 26, to help them avoid the potholes that their old man had experienced along the way, and to tell them kind of the glide path to how do you create a life of significance from the get go. Another great group of people are those people who were like I was in my career. I I felt for a long time that I was wearing a mask of not really being authentically who I was when I was showing up at work. And what it led to was burnout. And I use this a lot, what Henry David Thoreau calls quiet desperation. You just feel like you're going through the motions, but nothing you're doing matters. And it leads to you feeling disconnected, numb, which is one of the worst feelings you can feel, apathetic about everything around you. So if you're stuck in that point and you don't know how to break through, Passion Struck is the solution. Another group are your high performers who maybe have plateaued, and they don't understand why are they plateauing and not reaching that next level. It's another great thing for them. And then it's for anyone in their life stage where they feel like they need a reinvention. It could be someone who has just retired and they're looking to do what they want to do next for their life. Maybe it's a person who's in their 70s who's been put off writing a book for so many years and they don't know how to get started. I have to tell you, Scott, one of the most fun things I did recently is I went to this book fair, and I happened to be positioned next to a woman who was 80 years old, and she had just authored her first book. And she was so passion struck, I could not believe it. It was like she was the most alive she had ever been in her life at 80. So it's for anyone who's going through a reinvention or feels like they want a reinvention to rediscover their purpose.
That's great. I think it's great because I'm someone who's constantly transformed myself and transitioned. I'm always building what I call the next chapter in the current chapter, and this is something I talk about a lot. And it just means that I'm just building towards the next level. I was talking about this the other day. Life sometimes feels like it's a scatter plot chart, and all these plots are everywhere. And then you look back on your journey, and they're all in this linear line straight up to where you are today. And the moment you didn't realize how the wine festival and your beginning of your career and beginning a new
Yeah.
company and selling that company, like they have nothing to do with each other, your church. And then all of a sudden, everything is this beautiful picture that got you where you are. And you need those moments of passion to break through to the next level. And I think the recipe is great. I like that plateau conversation because so many people feel stuck. They don't they go you're trying to take them from stuck to struck, and that's a big difference.
Yeah, and it's in the chapter just after I go through Gardner Leadership Conscientious Engager, and then I go into this chapter on actually the 5 plateaus on becoming passion struck. So it's a great way to think about it. I actually give stages so people can take a quiz and understand where they currently are compared to where they want to go, with information on what it means to be in each stage.
Yeah, I think that your mission and your experience are so unique, and it puts you in a position that what you're sharing has such an impact on the world. And a book like this is something that so many people can leverage and utilize to get out of that disconnection, to get into that connection, to find what matters to them and to feel like they matter. And all the things that we've discussed here today. And I definitely I love the fact that Audible exists, and things that our children can now listen to books. I can't imagine how many books I would have listened to when I was a teenager or college kid if I didn't have to physically read it. which is funny because now I don't mind doing any of it. I read tons of books every single year, but the way that we can communicate. My youngest son's reading a book right now about mindset, and he listens to it and reads it at the same time. And I think it's an amazing thing. But this is the kind of book that I'd highly recommend for so many people, and there is no age demographic. It's valuable to everybody.
Well, I appreciate that so much. And I have to say, I've been doing exactly what you're describing with Mel Robbins' most recent book, The Let Them Theory. And I love it. I think another great book like that is Matthew McConaughey's. I think Green Lights is
Green
so much
lights,
better
yeah.
to hear him speak it. And just to hear how Mel ad libs throughout her, which my publisher wouldn't allow me to do, but she ad libs a lot. And those ad libs really make poignant moments beyond her written words. So that's another great one. But thank you so much for saying that about the book.
Yeah, and I loved Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights. I thought it was phenomenal. Just the way he tells a story, the inflection of the voice. I also like Stanley Tucci, and so when Tucci tells a story, I like Tucci's
Yeah.
voice. It's fun to listen to him talk. I've been listening to the his latest book. I have it somewhere around here, but I listen to it on the plane where I don't have to actually think about anything. It's just about what I ate in a year, and it's so remedial and basic, but he's telling the stories of the family dynamic and the food, and it's these are things that really do connect. John, I'm so honored to have had you. Thanks for joining us today. People can find you. Let everyone know where they can find you, because you're making an impact on the world, and you're helping people matter. Where can they get passion struck? Where can they find John R. Miles?
Yeah. Scott, is it okay if I give them like a closing remark?
Yeah, I'd love it. I'd love it.
So, for those of you who are listening, I want you to know for each and every single one of you that mattering, it begins with you. It's not something that you wait for others to give. It's something that you have to practice daily and intentionally. Because when you make people feel valued, you create a ripple effect that strengthens families, workplaces, and communities. And the simple truth is, mattering is what makes life meaningful. So, who can you make feel like they matter today? Because in the end, what you talk about on this podcast, love, faith, impact, and energy, is what we seek by making others feel that they matter and that we matter ourselves. And for someone who wants to learn more about me and my mission, for me personally, you can go to my website, johnrmiles.com, for the book, the podcast, everything else that we're doing for companies and creating cultures of mattering. You can go to passionstruck, struck.com. And Scott, thank you so much for having me. It was a profound honor.
It was wonderful. I could talk to you for hours. So this is hopefully the beginning of several conversations that we get to have in our careers. I hope to bump into you many times, and I'm grateful for your work, John. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much again.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.